For all of our lives, we've been told that quitting is bad. So why then do we all love and remember watching scenes like this?
Hey, Paulie, what's up? No, everything's fine. Hey, listen, I quit.
What if you learned that grit and perseverance and never quitting have been intentionally packaged and sold to us? And what if you realize that the one thing most successful people have in common is quitting? We start this book following Keller, a Pulitzer Prize-winning writer, at a pivotal moment in her life where she was faced with the decision to tough it out or quit. She's crying on the floor of her little apartment in a brand new town, overwhelmed by being in grad school in a new city, and she ultimately ends up calling her father, who says, "I'm 3 hours away, I'm on my way to get you." When it comes to quitting, we are the only animals that complicate it so much. When it comes to other animals, quitting is simply an act of survival. If an activity isn't working or providing enough sustenance, the animal quits. To expend too much energy on something that wasn't working would be a matter of life and death. It would leave an animal vulnerable to predators. Yet when it comes to humans, we have been flooded with literary characters and stories preaching the importance of grit and pushing through and pulling yourself up from your bootstraps, whether it's stories like Paul Bunyan to John Henry, or even the Greek story of poor Sisyphus, who kept rolling that stone up the hill even though he knew it would come rolling down every single time. And aside from quitting an addiction, quitting is often thought as a weak, disgusting word. But when you get down to the Latin root of the word, quitare, it actually means to put to rest. So where did this negative connotation even come from? Well, if you go to dictionary.com, you'll see that there are actually 3 offered definitions for quit. One is to stop, cease, or discontinue. Next is to depart from or leave. Next is to give up or resign, to let go, to relinquish. So where does this dark side of grit come from? Well, Keller helps us trace it back exactly to the late 1800s. We'll get to that shortly. In crafting this book, Keller went around asking people what the most significant thing they've ever quit was and if they regret it. And the results were fascinating because out of all the people she asked, far more regretted not quitting when they should have than they regretted quitting. Chapter 1, Quitting. It's all in your head.
Simone Biles has withdrawn.
In 2021, Simone Biles shocked the world by withdrawing at the last minute from the 2021 Olympics, citing mental health as the reason. And although many people were supportive of this choice, others called her selfish and unpatriotic, like British TV host Piers Morgan. So why was this public quitting so controversial? Well, it all comes down to how we as humans perceive quitting. In her quest for information about our animal counterparts and quitting, Keller reached out to one of the top evolutionary biologists of his time, Professor Jerry Coyne. And Coyne said, perseverance in a biological sense doesn't make sense unless it's working. In other words, the best method for survival is to give up on anything not contributing to that survival. Let's look at the finches in the Galapagos Islands. These birds' diet consists mainly of small seeds found inside a spiny weed called caltrop, and the survival of their species depends on how efficiently they can forage for food. Meaning, if they spend too much time trying to get one seed out of a very particularly spiny weed, they are expending too much energy and they will move on. They'll move on to the next food source. The most time that a bird would spend on a single weed trying to get a seed out was 6 minutes before moving on. How can birds do this, but we can't? Similarly, in New Zealand, a study was done on crows. A crow playground was created in which there were sticks that the crows could pull, and the sticks attached to a string had a piece of meat on the end. When the crow could see the piece of meat, they pulled the stick immediately. However, if their view of the meat was obstructed, they stopped trying immediately. Perseverance is linked to the assurance of a reward. So without that visual reward, the crow isn't willing to expend energy on a not-so-sure thing. And thirdly, look at honeybees. The female honeybee's sting actually kills her, and a study in 2020 followed female honeybees to see how they determine whether or not to spend that one powerful sting and thus end their life. The study determined that these bees actually calculate a number of things before making that decision, including the proximity of the predator to the hive, as well as the hive's current reproductive potential. If current reproductive potential is high, there's no need to risk her life. However, if the current reproductive potential is low, she is willing to make the sacrifice. In other words, they calculate the odds, and if it's not worth the risk, they quit. So you might be thinking, yeah, but quitting isn't life or death for humans, but what if I told you it is? Between 1998 and 2018, 34 athletes died during athletic practices due to things like dehydration and heat exhaustion. A few names are Corey Stringer, Jordan McNair, Rashidi Wheeler, and Grant Brace. These were bright, able-bodied athletes, and our bodies give us signals when we are about to fail, so how did they miss the signals, or why were they trained not to listen to them? And more importantly, why didn't coaches or teammates interfere? And fascinatingly, when Keller interviewed people about their quitting moments, she found it striking how many people actually used the phrase life or death. Whether it be the death of their happiness, their finances, their marriage, or their mental health. So many of us push off quitting until we feel like we are dying. In the 1999 cult classic Office Space, Jennifer Aniston plays a character who, well, just watch this clip.
All right, there's my flare. I hate this job.
Keller says that this clip is extremely popular in pop culture because it likely represents a dark, deep desire that many of us have to flip off our boss and walk out of our job. It's a unique dream that scares us, and because we don't quite get to live it out ourselves, it's enthralling to watch someone else get to do it. But not every quitting scene in pop culture has the same effect on us. Watch this scene from the 1982 film, An Officer and a Gentleman.
You can kick me out of here, but I ain't quitting.
Jones was a son of a Casey Jones was a son of a I want your DOR.
No, sir.
I want your DOR.
I ain't gonna quit.
Spell it. DOR. I ain't gonna quit.
With Jennifer Aniston's character, we're rooting for her. We want her to quit. We're cheering her on from our couch, but yet, if Mayo quits, we will be heartbroken and devastated. And that tells us a lot about our view, our love-hate relationship with perseverance and giving in to pressure. And ironically, our literature is also full of examples of the inability to give up. Characters like Hamlet and Macbeth show what happens when compulsions like jealousy and revenge can hold you captive and keep you from quitting when you really should. So let's get to the part I know you're interested in. Where did this start? How quitting became a dirty word. Chapter 2. Keller familiarizes us with a man named Samuel Smiles, and in mid-Victorian London in 1859, Smiles published a book called Self-Help, with illustrations of character and conduct. It was a book that was filled with stories of successful men and preached the importance of how you cannot live a successful life without perseverance and grit, and you can never, ever give up. It was essentially the first self-help book, and it was an instant hit. You see, Smiles helped begin the self-help market at the perfect time in history. The Industrial Revolution was just picking up, and suddenly a vast fortune was being made by very, very few. And where did that leave everyone else? Well, relentless poverty. To write a self-help book at that time gave people a way to reconcile the vast difference and disparity in wealth by putting all of the responsibility on the individual and how hard they worked. By promising people that if they just push through and work hard and never quit their job, they too will be rich. In an emerging market economy, there was nothing better you could do to ensure your workers kept working than to promise them essentially, work will set you free. This was also the first promotion of the whole idea of if someone else can do it, you can do it. And because it was such a hit, for the next 40 years, Smiles continued to publish sequel after sequel, each one equally successful as the first. And they all preached the same common theme. It's up to you to make your way in the world. What came next? Well, the New Thought movement in the 1900s. Very similar to what we consider the manifestation movement happening today. This movement produced two of the best-selling self-help books that are still bestsellers today, Think and Grow Rich and The Power of Positive Thinking. I've honestly read them, this was very fascinating, interesting for me to read because, again, these are just books preaching to persevere and that everything that happens to you in life is your own doing and never, ever, ever quit anything. So what does this have to do with why you can't quit the job that you hate or leave the relationship that is killing you inside? Everything. Because shortly following the self-help movement in the 1900s came the life coach movement of the 2000s. And you might be thinking, Kayla, isn't that exactly what you're doing right now? Yes. Actually, this was a very strange book for me to read because I love self-help books and I love motivational YouTube videos. But hold on, hang with me. The irony in all this is that this book was in the self-help section at Barnes & Noble. Okay, so it's like putting cancer information packets in the cigarette aisle. And in this new manifestation era that we live in came a shift in perspective of how people viewed their lives. They are no longer a culmination of your parents' social status, your income level, your physical or mental abilities. We now view your life as coming down to a single thing: your grit. How hard you can work without quitting. And Keller points out that although this idea isn't completely wrong, because obviously you reap what you sow in life, it's a little flawed because it completely ignores the fact that we are all at the mercy of circumstance. You can get a disease you've never heard of. Your child can die. You can have a child with a lifelong disability. Your spouse could get in an accident. You could get laid off. But Keller also points out that in these circumstances that we can't control, it is the part that we can control that makes the most difference. But Keller points out that it's often in these crossroads of what we can't control that we have the opportunity to make a life-altering decision by quitting perhaps something that's no longer serving us. And let's use the example of Howard Burks. In the 1970s, you would find a young Burks out in the forests of Oregon or Minnesota, camping, fishing, doing outdoorsy things. But today, Burks has a strong appreciation for the fate of events that you can't control, like volcanoes. And as volcanoes are out of our control, it was the part that was in his control of a volcano erupting that changed his life. In the 70s, he began filing his freelance writing with the NPR station in Eugene, Oregon. It was a hobby that he did in his free time. In 1980, Mount St. Helens, just south of Seattle, slowly started to produce ash and rumble, and he started filing as many stories as he could to the NPR station on this volcano. He essentially became the network's volcano guy. In fact, his NPR editor at that moment told him to get up on the mountain and stay there and wait. But he was enrolled in college at the time. He went to his professors and told them the situation and tried to see if they would work with him and let him do assignments while he was there on the volcano, and they all said no. If you miss 3 classes, you're out. You're failing the class. So he quit college, and he got his butt up on the mountain just in time for it to erupt. On May 18th, Mount St. Helens erupted, and the NPR station made him the primary reporter to cover the event. He was on air every day for months, and by the end of the year, he was hired on full-time as one of the NPR station's first national reporters, despite the fact that he had no college degree. Now, obviously, the volcano was the catalyst in Burks' life, but he didn't make it erupt. It's what he did decide to quit in that moment of eruption that changed his life forever. Had he been too afraid, too nervous to let go of being in college, of letting his parents down, of disappointing his professors, he would have missed out on a lifelong career as a successful reporter. So how do you know when you're in those crucial moments? Let's get into Chapter 3. A guide to quitting. Now, when you think of quitting, you probably think of quitting cold turkey in the same way that Burks quit college completely. But quitting doesn't always have to be such a drastic end to something that you're doing. Keller introduces us to the concept of something she calls the quasi-quasi quit. In 2021, the New York Times released a story on swimmer Vinny Marciano. He was breaking records left and right, and he was being compared to Michael Phelps. He was still in high school. But suddenly, right at the peak of his career, Marciano disappeared. Despite being an avid athlete and lifelong swimmer, he had burned out on swimming. It had started to feel more like a burden than a passion, and despite disappearing from the public eye and swimming, Marciano was still there. He was just doing something different. He had pivoted. He had redirected his love for athletics from one sport to another, and you could now find him on any day climbing. He had given up swimming to be a climber. This is what Keller would call a quasi-quit. Not quite a complete quit, but a pivot. And in fact, despite our intrinsic belief that quitting is bad, statistics released both by The Atlantic and Bloomberg Business have shown that dabbling in more than one career while you're young have resulted exponentially in higher earnings in your prime earning years. By pivoting a lot when you're young and trying different things, switching career paths, you have a higher odds of finding a career that offers you mastery of skills with personal meaning with good pay. But this goes against everything that Smiles said in his first self-help book, which was that the only way to succeed in life was to pick one career path and stick with it and never, ever, ever quit. As Keller points out in this book, though, sometimes quitting can look more like a sideways shuffle to an adjacent opportunity. And one thing that Samuel Smiles overlooked when he wrote his self-help book, the lives of individuals like Benjamin Franklin, who had been notorious for jumping from job, to project to project to project, passionately leaving behind the ideas of yesterday to pursue something completely new the next day. And I don't know about you, but which name did you already know before watching this video? The quasi-quit was Benjamin Franklin's life strategy. But there can't be that many people who have quit abruptly and had success. Well, let's talk apple juice. In 1996, Greg Steltenpool started a California-based juice company, and it was an instant success. They sold juices, and they had reached an annual revenue of almost $60 million a year until catastrophe struck. E. coli contaminated thousands of apple juices, Odwalla juice bottles, and it resulted in the hospitalization of dozens of people and actually the death of one person. Within 2 years, Steltenpool resigned from the company and quit. You would probably be surprised then to hear that despite beverages being the downfall and the lowest rock bottom point of Steltenpool's life, he decided to yet again start a new beverage company. He later started a company called Khalifa, which sells non-dairy beverages like coffees with oat milk in them, and it was highly successful. Sometimes a quasi-quit doesn't mean quitting something to try something drastically different. Sometimes it means quitting only to return later with new knowledge and new wisdom and new information. And this story struck me particularly because I have tried over my 9 years of being an adult in this world to be a full-time artist probably 4 or 5 times, and I have failed at it almost every time until I've reached the point where I am today, a full-time artist. But if I had let that first or second failure convince me to never try again, despite gaining wisdom and information and motivation and perspective each time that I quit and went back to a regular job, I would have missed out on so many opportunities. I wouldn't have this art studio downtown on the 6th floor, and I wouldn't have ended up having a Today Show article written about me, and I wouldn't have gained nearly 800,000 followers on my art accounts on social media in the last 2 years. I wouldn't be sitting here making this YouTube video for you, and I probably wouldn't have had the time to paint any of these paintings on the wall behind me. Sometimes a quasi-quit means taking a break and coming back when you're better prepared. But many of us know what it feels like to stick to a losing hand for too long. And a good example of that is Elizabeth Helms, the founder of Theranos. When she discovered in 2014 that her new, hugely popular medical device didn't actually work, she faced 2 options. She could sit down her entire company, tell them the truth that the product didn't work, and quit. Or she could do what she did, which was not tell anyone the truth, double down on her claims that her medical device worked, continue to sell it, while all in the meantime secretly trying to get it to work. And by the time 2018 came around 4 years later, the choice to quit was taken out of her hands because she faced federal charges. Everyone found out and she was labeled a fraud, and Theranos became the business world's cautionary tale of greed and hubris. So why on earth didn't she quit when she had the chance? And why doesn't everyone quit at the right time? In the case of Elizabeth Holmes, it might seem glaringly obvious that what she should have done was quit. But what if it's equally glaringly obvious when we should quit to everyone else, and we're simply blinded to it by our routines? Let's talk about the 4 main reasons that Keller gives us that people don't quit when they should. Number 1, fear. Fear of the unknown can be absolutely debilitating. When you walk away from something you've known for a long time, you're walking into, well, you don't know. We have fear of letting people down, maybe our parents who helped pay for our college, or our coaches who we've known for our entire athletic career. Maybe the parents of the partner that we really don't want to be with anymore. We fear what everyone is going to think of us if we quit. Keller suggests that to combat this, we reframe our thinking from, I decided to quit, 2, I decided to do something else with my time. Make this quit not just an ending for what you're leaving, but make it a beginning for what you're entering into. Rather than focusing on what you're leaving behind, focus on what you have time for now with the extra space in your life. Whether it's more time with your children, less stress, or a sense of adventure, focus on the new beginning, not the ending. Number 2, what keeps us where we shouldn't be is sunk cost fallacy. Sunk cost fallacy is the idea that you've already invested so much time, so much energy, and so much money into this thing that if you were to quit, then all of that investment would essentially be a waste. We're trying to redeem what we've already invested, but to help fight this, Keller reminds you, you can't get back what you've put in. It's gone either way. No matter how hard you work and persevere, you'll never get that time, money, or energy back. Or in other words, one of my favorite quotes is, the longer you stay on the wrong train, the more expensive it is to get back. Just because you've already wasted so much time and energy on something doesn't mean you should waste more. The longer you continue to invest time and energy into something that's not right for you, the higher your sunk cost fallacy will be. The third reason that we don't quit when we should is the fact that we very much now have a public life. The term public life used to be reserved for politicians and celebrities because they were really the only ones living in the spotlight. But now that we have this tendency to share the most intimate parts of our lives and our decisions on social media, there's even more pressure not to disappoint people. What if I lose followers? What if people I went to high school with judge me? Keller reminds us that there can be a peace in privacy and that you control what you share with the world. Not every big decision that you make has to be public. Not every decision you make has to be shared with everyone you know, nor are we obligated to justify or defend it to people on the internet. And if you're struggling with the weight of the judgment of what people online are going to say about a decision, maybe the best thing you can do is step away from the internet and social media and get clarity about what decision is right for you. I mean, think about it. If you disappeared off the face of the internet tomorrow, who would know if you quit your job? Nobody except the people in your life. Don't make your decisions more stressful by sharing them with everyone. Number 4, lastly, what keeps us where we shouldn't be any longer is loss of connection. We often don't quit because we are losing connection to other people when we quit. We all know deep down that in order to open ourselves up to new connections and new people and new relationships, we have to make room by clearing out the ones that are no longer serving us. But at the same time, when we quit something, we're leaving a community. Communities give us a sense of being tethered down to something solid, a sense of belonging. And when you quit, you're kind of putting yourself out of the group. So how do we stop this disconnection from a previous group from keeping us somewhere we don't belong or we've outgrown? This is where Keller talks about the importance of finding a community of quitters. In other words, replacing that old community with a new community of people with the shared interests that you have. Most importantly, finding people who have also quit the same thing you have quit. There is great sustenance to be derived from realizing that you are not alone in making a difficult decision. It's reassuring to know that other people have quit that same thing, and guess what? They have flourished. And it gives you a sense of belonging. Again, you're tethering yourself to a group that thinks like you, has similar interests to you, and is wanting to move in the same direction as you in life. In other words, don't walk away from a community to nothing. Don't walk away from being a part of a group to being isolated. Find a new group. So, to quit or not to quit. Although there is no specific mathematic algorithm that you can punch in the factors of your life and get a yes or no answer like a magic 8-ball, Keller leaves us with a few questions to ask ourselves when we find ourselves in that crossroad. Number 1, are we making this decision based on what we believe is best for us or out of the fear of being labeled a quitter? Number 2, am I choosing what I truly want or am I choosing what someone else believes is best for me? Or lastly, as Dr. Gaurav Agarwal, psychiatrist and leadership coach for doctors and physicians who want to quit their job when they're at their limit, asks his patients, quit to what? What are you leaping towards? Make sure that you're not quitting because you had a bad day. Make sure that you're quitting because you're moving in the direction of something better. I hope this video was helpful and has helped give you the insight you needed to make that difficult decision that you might have been putting off for a long time. And let's form our own community of quitters, because I'm a quitter. I am a proud quitter of the 9-to-5 job lifestyle to be a full-time artist. Let's leave a comment below under this video and help each other out. Let's help each other gain perspective, community, and connection with other quitters. What is something that you have quit or are deciding whether or not to quit? And let's leave each other some feedback. Bye, friends. Go get to quitting.